All right, today we're tackling a difficult but absolutely crucial piece of history. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct the term buck breaking. We'll use our source material to really get a handle on its historical context, its strategic purpose, and what it all means today. So, let's dive in.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to start by defining this unspoken ritual to understand what it actually was. Then we'll dig into the cold, calculated logic behind it and see how the Caribbean became a kind of testing ground for these tactics. After that, we'll trace how that logic evolved over time. And finally, we'll look at what the source material proposes as a way to respond to it all, what it calls rebuilding the masculine archive.
Okay, so let's get right to it. The most important question first. What is buck breaking? To really grasp its impact, we have to start with a clear definition based on what our sources tell us. Now, this is super important to understand right from the jump. According to our sources, the term buck breaking itself, it's modern. You're not going to find it written down in old plantation records. It's a name we use today to describe a very real, very documented system of violence that was all about controlling and dominating enslaved men. And this quote from one of our main sources, Frank Rodriguez, it just nails it. The term isn't just some label. It's an act of digging up the past, of putting a name to a history of violence that was deliberately, systemically buried and silenced. The methods themselves were varied and horrifying, but they all had one thing in common. They were designed as public performances of terror. So whether it was sexual violence, castration, or beatings staged as a spectacle, the goal wasn't just physical pain. It was about deep, lasting psychological warfare carried out right in front of the entire community. And when you see this level of organized brutality, it just forces you to ask the big question, why? What could possibly be the strategic purpose behind something so specific and so public?
Was this just, chaotic, sadistic stuff from individual slave owners? Or, as the sources argue, was it something way more intentional, a calculated, repeatable strategy of control that the whole system used?
And this right here gets to the absolute core of the argument from our sources. This violence wasn't primarily driven by lust or some random desire. No, it was a strategic tool. It was a weapon of domination aimed at a man's mind, his spirit, designed to shatter his sense of self, his connection to his ancestors, and any thought of fighting back. The goals here were layered. On the surface, yeah, it was about stopping rebellion. But the real strategy went so much deeper. It was about public humiliation, about cutting men off from their own history and their identity. The ultimate goal? To completely rewrite what masculinity meant in the minds of the community and make it synonymous with pain, shame, and powerlessness. So where were these tactics perfected? Where was this playbook written? Well, our sources point to a very specific proving ground, the islands of the Caribbean. The author Frank Rodriguez introduces this absolutely chilling concept. He calls each island a containment corridor. Think about what that means. It frames the entire Caribbean as a series of isolated laboratories where colonial powers could experiment with and perfect their methods of control before shipping them out elsewhere. And this table here, it really shows us how that core strategy was twisted and adapted to fit different places. The goal, domination, was always the same, but the main tactic would shift. In British Jamaica, it was all about public punishment. In French Haiti, they targeted spiritual leaders. In Spanish Puerto Rico, it was forced breeding. Each empire cooked up its own unique flavor of this psychological war. So you might think, okay, slavery ends and this horrifying ritual stops, right? Well, according to the source material, not even close. The argument is that the underlying logic, the engine of control, it just evolved. This line from the text is just so powerful. Empire never stopped the ritual, it simply changed the stage. The idea here is that these methods of control didn't just disappear, they mutated. They shifted from the plantation to other systems to other institutions. The sources map out this chilling evolution. It started with the raw, direct physical violence of the plantation. Then, after emancipation, that control shifted into the legal system. Think Jim Crow laws and mass incarceration. From there, it moved into our culture, with distorted media portrayals, and finally into what the author calls medical warfare, systemic abuse through things like forced sterilizations.
So after outlining this incredibly bleak history of targeted violence, the source material doesn't just leave us there. It actually proposes a framework for how to respond, a path for resistance and for reclamation. And this is where the perspective just completely flips. The argument is that this history isn't just a story about trauma. It's also a story of profound survival. Resistance and memory, they didn't just disappear, they were encoded, hidden away in culture, in rhythm, even in silence, as a way to protect them for the future. To fight back against this history, the source proposes a set of actions it calls codex protocols. Basically, it's a three-part strategy. First, protection, actively defending the next generation from these systemic attacks. Second, refusal, consciously rejecting the shame, the media lies, and the logic of empire. And finally, the active work of rebuilding, putting lineage back together, reclaiming the body, and reactivating your own rituals. And that brings us to this final declaration, which really just sums up the entire thesis of the source material. We were not broken. We were encoded. It's such a powerful reframing of history, turning away from a narrative of just victimhood and toward one of survival, of encrypted resistance, and of incredible enduring strength. And this leaves us with one final big question to think about. After understanding this historical ritual of control, how does it change the way you view our modern systems and institutions? What echoes of this logic might we still be seeing today? And what does that mean for us, right here, right now?